I was actually the true daughter of a wealthy family, kidnapped as a child and sold to a slum. When my biological parents found me, they gave me two choices: either go back home with them or they would leave me $50,000 to stay. Without hesitation, I chose the 50,000. They scorned me for being greedy and ignorant, saying that being a wealthy heiress could bring me far more than $50,000. I glanced at the pitiful adopted daughter next to them and sneered. With how much they doted on her, it was unclear whether I would return as the family heiress or just another servant. I might be greedy, but I'm not foolish. Ever since I can remember, I was raised by an old lady who collected scraps. Growing up without parents and living in poverty, I was often bullied, but luckily I was clever, performed well academically, and had a strong sense of revenge, which eventually made others wary of provoking me. Being accustomed to poverty has made me extremely money conscious, always strategizing on how to earn more, and people often say I'm lost in greed. One day, running late again because of my money-making schemes, I arrived at school just as classes had begun. My usually indifferent teacher stopped me as I yawned at the door. He looked at me with a complex mix of scrutiny, disappointment, and pity. I paused, alert and confused. Lee, smiling, pushed me towards a man and said, "Sonny, this is your father." I looked up at the man, who appeared indifferent, and said, "Yes, according to the records, you are my biological daughter. We'll discuss the details in the office." Still dazed, I was nudged forward by Lee, who whispered, "Go on." In the office, 4 people were seated with varying expressions, none of which were particularly joyful. The man beside me introduced himself. "I'm Zoe, your biological father. This is your mother and your brothers. You were kidnapped as a newborn, and we've come to take you home." I was skeptical. "How can you be sure it's me? And how did you find me?" Zoe explained, "You donated blood last month, and the DNA matched ours. The police notified us." I remembered that last month, I had no money for food, and heard that donating blood would get me free milk and bread, so I went. Although the nurse accidentally took 400 cubic centimeters of blood instead of 200 cubic centimeters, causing me, already malnourished, to faint and bleed profusely. Fortunately, I got the food and an extra $600 from the shocked nurse, which helped me get through that tough month. As I regained my composure facing these strangers, I felt awkward, trying to think of how to start a conversation. The girl sitting in the middle spoke up with a sweet smile. "Why did you come to school so late, little sister? I heard the bell ring a while ago. Did something happen on the way?" I waved it off. "No. I was working the night shift at the internet cafe and didn't wake up on time." Luna, the woman who was supposedly my mother, looked at me disapprovingly. "How can you be late for school? It's lucky Pearl asked you, or I wouldn't have noticed your lack of punctuality." Hadn't I already explained? Who else would be up at 4 in the morning and manage to get up at 6 for class? I was slightly annoyed but replied politely, "I'll be more careful next time. I only got to sleep at 4 this morning. I was really tired." Zoe frowned deeply, clearly displeased. "Don't use that as an excuse. Rules are rules. You weren't raised by our side since you were young, and your habits are truly appalling," they said. I almost spoke up in my defense but swallowed my words instead, feeling utterly perplexed. After explaining myself for so long, were they not listening? They never raised me. Yet they had the audacity to start blaming me. Hesitantly, I asked, "Hold on, are we really that close?" At that, their faces fell, as if I had insulted them. Pearl looked at me disapprovingly and sighed. "Sister, Mom and Dad are telling the truth. I know it's hard to hear, but they're doing this for your good. How can you disrespect our parents like this? You should apologize to them." I was momentarily stunned. I glanced at her incredulously. "You mean to say that after working a night shift and only getting 4 hours of sleep, I should feel ashamed and apologize to someone else?" I pointed at her earnestly. "Big sister, did you drink too much low-quality milk powder when you were a child? Are you missing a screw?" Pearl was visibly frustrated and bit her lip. "I'm just standing up for our parents. Do you realize they pushed aside their own affairs just to come pick you up today? How can you hurt them like this? Shouldn't they, though? If a child has been kidnapped and not seen for years, and is finally found, shouldn't they come to pick them up? Those TV shows about families searching for lost children always show parents putting aside their work to personally retrieve them. Although I thought she was being preposterous, Zoe and her husband seemed moved by her words, their expressions softening significantly, clearly pleased. They both looked at me again, evidently waiting for my apology. I couldn't understand. All this fuss over a few bucks. Don't fool me because I'm less educated. In any normal company, things can operate smoothly without the boss for a while. If it's as you say, then there must be a serious problem with this company. Pearl was choked up, and Luna quickly spoke up for her. What do you know, Pearl is just kindly reminding you, but you, being so stubborn and unruly, how did you grow up? I pursed my lips, without parents, with the heavens and earth as my shelter, I begged my way through life. Luna's gentle and dignified face turned ice cold. You still refuse to repent, we are your elders, look at how you are treating us. I looked her straight in the eye. And how exactly are you treating me, prejudiced and blind? Is this how elders are supposed to act? Pearl jumped in again, scolding, how can you be so rude to mom and dad? I was getting impatient with her constant interruptions, which felt like a comedy act. Shut up, big sister, who are you to boss me around? I don't even know you, you didn't even introduce yourself. Why are you meddling in other people's business without any sense of propriety? Her face instantly changed, turning bright red, her eyes rimmed with red as she nervously twisted her fingers. She's my sister, and I warn you to be polite to her. Jack, my older brother, stepped in front of Pearl, his expression unfriendly as he looked at me, his demeanor suggesting a deep-seated grudge. The others also looked displeased. As if my words had deeply offended them, I said meaningfully, oh. I didn't hear you introduce her earlier, so, she's my replacement, huh? The biological daughter disappears, and you find a stand-in, or is this just a game for wealthy people? With a sullen expression, Zoe snapped, quiet, who taught you to be so disrespectful? I shrugged nonchalantly, no one. After all, I've been without parents since I was a child. He choked up slightly and said coldly, come back with us, we need to straighten out your behavior. Oh, I drew out my words slowly, resting my chin on my hands and smiling mockingly at the pitiful, green tea girl next to me. What about her? Now that the original is back, the replacement should be thrown away, right? The face of little green tea turned pale instantly. Her eyes filled with clear panic and fear, of course. I also caught a fleeting glimpse of vicious jealousy in her eyes. In a frantic state, she grabbed onto Luna's clothes, pleading pitifully, Mom, I don't want to leave you all. Aren't we a family? I'm scared. Please don't send me away. Luna hugged her tightly. Don't be scared, Pearl, you will always be my daughter, an indispensable part of our family. We won't send you away. Ron, who had been indifferent from the start, also gently touched her head, comforting her attentively. Don't be afraid, Pearl, your brother will always protect you, not to mention Jack, whose eyes were filled with a venomous look as if he wished he could kill me. Even Zoe, instead of criticizing and scrutinizing me, looked at Pearl with a worried and tender expression. Pearl nestled into her mother's arms, gradually smiling under the teasing of her brothers. No one paid attention to me. I watched this harmonious family scene with a cold eye, almost wanting to slap myself for expecting anything from these familial bonds. Knowing it would turn out like this, why bother going to the office? It was a complete waste of time. I might as well have stayed in the classroom and done some extra work. Improving my grades and outperforming others would be far more interesting than dealing with this crazy family. Impatiently checking the time, I realized it was almost time to eat. I had applied for the school's free meal subsidy, and the happiest part of my day was going to the cafeteria. Even though my classmates thought the food was worse than swill, for a girl who couldn't afford meat after leaving the cafeteria, it was fantastic. I could eat my fill and even sneak some food back to save money on dinner. I cleared my throat to interrupt them. Hey, enough already. What did you want from me? To perform a display of familial warmth in front of me. Despite no blood relation, Zoe looked at me deeply. Can you really not accept Pearl? I nodded emphatically. Yes. It's either her or me. Zoe sighed deeply. I know you're morally questionable, but I didn't expect you to be so narrow-minded. Pearl has been pampered by us all her life. She's gentle and well-behaved and just turned 18. Leaving us would be very hard on her. Are you trying to kill her? Just turned 18. Is it really that serious? Holding my forehead, I lamented. I've endured hardship for 16 years and I didn't die. She's even 2 years older than me. She's an adult, Jack scoffed, typical of someone raised by a garbage-picking old woman, always petty and narrow-minded. It fits you perfectly. My lips tightened instantly, and my eyes sharpened as I stared at Jack. You can criticize me, but who gave you the right to insult my grandmother? Jack, seeing my emotional reaction, felt even more justified, angry. I'm only stating facts, he continued. Rubbish raised by old rubbish, living off handouts from others every day. It's truly pitiful and tragic. If I were one of the lowly ants, I would have been so ashamed that I'd drown myself in a river, yet here you are, barely clinging to life. I gritted my teeth, staring intently at his face, my fists clenched tightly, bones cracking with the tension. Such filthy words. Have you been eating dirt? I threw a clean punch towards his face, but Jack quickly dodged, smirking. Such petty tricks are nothing to me, you, but in the next second, my foot swept his knees, and with a thud, Jack fell to the ground, pale-faced, his legs weakly kneeling before me. Sweat poured down his face like rain. He lay there like a fish stranded ashore, too exhausted to do anything but gasp for air. I slowly withdrew, expressionless, and said, "Get lost, you're nothing but a loudmouth loser." Jack's face contorted with rage as he roared, "You bitch, are you insane?" I simply extended my hand, and Jack instinctively shut up. I rolled my eyes dramatically and scoffed, "You dislike this and that all day. Do you think you're an emperor? If you can't stand it, go die." Jack trembled with anger, his face growing paler. Luna screamed, shocked, her finger trembling as she pointed at me, "You're a madwoman, you really are." I took it as a compliment. "Thanks for the praise." Ron looked menacing. "Who gave you the audacity to hit someone?" I shrugged indifferently. He started with his nasty mouth, "By hitting him, I'm just doing everyone a favor. If you're capable, hit me back." You, Ron, furious, actually raised his hand and approached me. I faced him fearlessly, ready for his next move. "Come back." Zoe stopped him. "Since when have you become so impulsive, Dad?" Ron called out reluctantly and backed down under Zoe's firm stance. Zoe turned to me with a frown. "You shouldn't be so violent. That's no way for a girl to behave," I responded coolly. "I'm not as lucky as Pearl, pampered and adored since childhood, with people rushing to her aid just because she plays the victim. From a chaotic childhood, beaten down in the filthy mud, tasting bitter dirt and the strong smell of blood, to throwing my assailants into a sewer and watching them struggle as I looked down on them, to now sitting in a clean classroom and studying well. Guess what I relied on?" Zoe's brow twitched, a hint of wariness in her eyes. It wasn't necessarily fear of me, but more about the risk of bringing such an uncontrollable element home. Our family exchanged glances, reassessing my worth. When they looked at me again, their eyes were much clearer, as if they had been punched. Zoe's expression softened, adopting a more conciliatory approach. "We're deeply sorry for what you've been through, but dwelling on it won't help. I see that you're in pain living with us, and our values clash. Now, you have two choices. Either come home with us and try to fit in, or take 500,000 and we'll have nothing to do with each other from now on." 500,000. My eyes lit up, and I made my decision instantly. "Give me the 500,000, and I promise, from this day forward, I'll forget today's incident and never have any dealings with the James family again." Zoe was taken aback, not expecting me to be so decisive. "Are you sure?" "Of course," I replied. After a brief silence and exchanging a glance with Luna, he sighed. "You're not young anymore, you have your own judgment, and we respect your choice." I rolled my eyes. His words sounded noble, but there was not even a pretense of trying to keep me. The lawyer arrived quickly, and after signing the agreement, Zoe looked at me deeply. "This is the path you've chosen for yourself. Take care." Seeing right through it, I responded directly, "Don't worry, I won't regret it and cling to you all." After the dust settled, the James family prepared to leave. Luna, in her high heels, walked past me without a second glance, as if looking at me would be bad luck. Pearl, holding her hand, passed me with a victoriously curved smile, saying meaningfully, "Little sister, take good care of yourself." I slowly raised my hand, causing Pearl's expression to stiffen. She hurried off, almost in a panic. "How can you be so barbaric, Jack?" Supported by Ron and barely able to walk, still couldn't keep his mouth shut, just as expected, coming from the slums, greedy and shallow. You got all dazzled by just 50,000. Holding the check in my hand, I stood up straight, my expression indifferent. The James family, wealthy and influential, but they only offered me 50,000, clearly looking down on me. Thinking that's all I'm worth, I didn't want more from them. Consider it a nurturing fee. Jack continued to revel in my misfortune. A single outfit for Pearl costs 200,000. If you had come back with us, you wouldn't need this 50,000. Ultimately, it's your own greed and ignorance. You truly missed out on the bigger prize for something trivial. How ironic. Ron nodded in agreement. Your vision is too narrow, truly incomparable to even 1,000th of what Pearl is. Oh, I drawled, and whose favor does she enjoy such a lavish lifestyle from? Jack's smile faded, and he retorted, what does that matter? You suffered, but Pearl is innocent. I know you're scheming, and I warn you not to use this as an excuse to harm my sister, or you'll regret it. Ron also stared at me, his dark eyes serious. Z is right, your forced departure from home has nothing to do with Pearl. Even if you're upset, you can't take it out on her. He paused, then added as if it were obvious, ultimately, it's just your bad luck. My fingers clenched tightly, looking at the face in front of me. If one looked closely, my features bore some resemblance to these two brothers. Anyone observant could guess our blood relation, from the classroom to the office. Although I appeared calm, I was extremely anxious inside. Even the fiercest woman hopes to be loved. Although I feel strong and independent enough to handle anything by myself, I can't help but hope for familial affection. But wearing my faded pants and worn-out shoes, the moment I entered the office and saw the neatly dressed family, the first feelings that surged were inferiority and timidity. Facing their scrutinizing, critical gazes, the boiling blood in my body gradually cooled. Then, there was Pearl, surrounded and clearly adored, wearing a new luxury suit from a high-end store I could only dream of entering. The bag she carried, I only met her online. She had jet black, shiny hair and smooth, slender hands that had never done any heavy labor. She truly lived up to her name, treasured like a gem. My brothers also received an elite education, standing tall with a confident and generous demeanor. Standing before them, I saw my own reflection through their eyes, my perennially malnourished, thin body, pale as snow skin, and calloused hands. All these felt like a chasm separating me from them. The familiar shadows in our features faded, and amid an inexplicable sourness, I lowered my eyes, a resolute voice inside telling me that we were not the same. Since I never had it, I couldn't talk about losing it, let alone having any regrets. I smiled in relief. No, I am fortunate with my fate. Not being part of your pretentious family is a blessing. Ron's eyes flickered, clearly thinking I was feigning strength, and he scoffed, stop pretending, you'll regret it. Really, we'll just have to see. After they left, Lee came running. Out of breath, this teacher, who had always been kind to me, stood in front of me with a complex expression. I know everything, why be so foolish? If you went back with them to the James family, you wouldn't have to struggle so hard and suffer for decades. I smiled and shook my head. Hardship is not hard to bear, I'm used to it. Seeing the care in his eyes, my gaze softened. It's okay, Lee. I've been maintaining the top spot in my class while working part-time. Besides, they gave me some money, enough for my grandmother's medical bills. Don't worry, I'll make you proud in the college entrance exams. He sighed, feeling a bit sorrowful. Do I really need a top scorer from you? You're always so independent, never softening your words. They say a crying child gets the candy. Look at that girl, she knows how to charm people much better than you. I took a deep breath, completely indifferent. So what? I don't even like them. Lee scratched his head. That's true. Sigh, your dad asked me to properly educate you before he passed, told me not to let you be late all the time, not picking up bad habits. Damn, he exclaimed, he doesn't know you're top of your class, does he? And with you being late today, they must have the wrong impression of you. I smirked. Prejudices in people's hearts are like a mountain. As long as he doesn't like me, he'll always find faults. Lee sighed. I always feel indignant for you. You could have had a better life, but got misled. You managed to get into high school on your own efforts, and then your grandmother had that incident. You could have been taken home by your biological parents to enjoy a good life, but they misunderstood you. It's no big deal. I waved my hand indifferently. Class is almost over. I'm going to visit my grandmother in the hospital. I won't be attending the evening self-study. Go on then. Lee waved his hand. I can't control you. I first went to the bank with the check, withdrew some money, and scheduled the next withdrawal. Finally feeling at ease, seeing the balance in my account, I felt such a relief all over. I used the money to pay for the subsequent medical expenses at the hospital. The attending doctor told me with a mix of joy and concern, "We have found the most reliable treatment for your grandmother, but it's quite expensive, amounting to almost 400,000. The money was sufficient, in that moment. Despite my dislike for James's family, I couldn't help but be grateful to them for resolving my urgent dilemma. 500,000, mere pocket change for them, yet an amount I couldn't save even if I scrimped to the extreme after my grandmother's hospitalization. With a calm demeanor, I stated, "We accept the treatment." After finalizing the treatment plan, I went to the old lady's hospital room. She was squinting her eyes, sewing something. I asked her, "Grandma, what are you sewing?" She looked up at me, smiling warmly. "I'm making a backpack and a pencil case for my granddaughter. She needs them for school." I bent down to take a closer look, but she waved me off. Her face stern, she said, "Don't touch, you'll dirty them. My granddaughter likes cleanliness." My pupils shrank and my fingertips trembled slightly, my voice rough. "Don't you recognize me?" The old lady lifted her wrinkled eyelids, scrutinized me carefully, and shook her head. "No, I don't recognize you. How could that be?" I almost exclaimed in shock, but managed a forced smile. "Grandma, stop joking. I'm not joking with you, young lady. If you don't tell me who you are, how could I recognize you?" I dug my nails into my palm, the pain forcing me to keep calm. "My name is Sunny." "Oh, your name is Sunny," the old lady interrupted excitedly. "My granddaughter is also named Sunny. She's very bright, attends the best middle school in the city, always ranks first in her exams, and has a lovely personality. She doesn't mind that this old woman is a burden. She's even paying for my hospital bills." She suddenly fell silent, dropping her sewing. Her cloudy eyes dimmed. Her voice gradually choked up. "I heard that my illness is costly, and what money could a student make? The last few times she visited, she was all skin and bones. This old hag has lived too long, always a burden on her. Why can't I just die sooner?" she repeated softly. "Why can't I just die sooner?" I covered my face in distress, tears moistening my palms, biting my lip hard to prevent any sounds from escaping. She had never said these things to me before. Every time I visited the hospital, I always reminded her to listen to the doctor, to eat well and aim to live a long life. Each time, she would look at me tenderly, earnestly promising, and always urging me to go back to school quickly, not wanting me to worry. With my face covered, my voice muffled, I said, "If you were gone, wouldn't your granddaughter be all alone? She only has you, and she's scared of the dark. How could you bear to leave her behind?" Grandma paused, then resignedly said, "She has relatives." When I found her, she was dressed in very fine clothes, clearly from a well-off home. Probably, the human traffickers saw her family had money, feared her parents would spend the money in time to search, and dumped her in a trash bin. Otherwise, I wouldn't have found her. If I pass away, she can safely go back home. I closed my eyes tightly, feeling a throbbing pain in my chest. "But Grandma, do you know she is not liked by her family? Do you realize she has always seen you as her own kin, as close as blood? Do you know that with your departure, she will truly have no home left?" My chest felt as if it were blocked by a massive stone, making it hard for me to breathe. Just then, the doctor arrived and I hurriedly went up to him. "What is happening to my grandmother? Why doesn't she remember me?" The doctor paused before answering. "A brain tumor has triggered Alzheimer's disease. She started showing symptoms about a half month ago." Half a month. Bitterness filled my mouth. In the past few weeks, I could barely find time to visit her, always busy working various jobs to earn money for medical expenses. I tried to say something, but in the end, all I could do was dejectedly bow my head. Life is full of disappointments, and no one can have it all. Even if I could start over, I would still need to earn money. I don't have the luxury of choice. Through the glass, I watched the doctor take my grandmother for tests. After staring for a couple of seconds, I turned and left. I needed to return to school. With the college entrance exam a week away, I aimed to get into a good university and take my grandmother to a broader world. The day before the exam, I skipped class to visit her in the hospital. She was scheduled for surgery during the days of my exams. She still couldn't recognize me, but she continued to proudly talk about her granddaughter to anyone who would listen. Even when I deliberately reached for a bag she had knitted, she angrily slapped my hand away, protectively saying, "Go away, this is for my granddaughter, don't touch it." Watching her spirited demeanor, I even imagined her glowing with happiness as we went home after the exams. A sense of unprecedented calm filled my heart. On my way back to school, I unexpectedly ran into someone I knew. Under the dim streetlights, a couple kissed passionately, seemingly inseparable and deeply in love. The light flickered, and I recognized the woman. It was Pearl. She wasn't in her usual white dress but was wearing a low-cut tight t-shirt and shorts so short they nearly revealed half her buttocks. Her sophisticated makeup added a touch of allure and maturity to her innocent looks. Standing 5 steps away, I tilted my head, wondering what the James family would think if they saw her like this. I chuckled briefly, but didn't intend to meddle. Just as I was about to leave, I noticed the couple had stopped. Pearl looked at me in shock. Her expression changed several times, finally settling on anger. "I knew it, you pretentious bitch," pretending to leave the James family behind but actually stalking me. I held my forehead and said, "You're mistaken, I was just passing by." She scoffed. "Do you think I'm stupid? Everyone's busy with exams at school, and here you are. What a coincidence." "Hold it right there," Pearl commanded arrogantly. Annoyed, I replied, "I'm not interested in your private life, just passing by." "Believe it or not, that's up to you." After saying this, I didn't want to get entangled with her and started to walk away, but then I heard her shouting to the man beside her, "Spencer, stop her. If she tells my parents, I'm done for." The man stood in front of me, his gaze menacing. "Now that you know about us, we can't let you go." "What does that mean?" As our eyes met, alarms went off throughout my body. The look in his eyes clearly wished for my disappearance. I glanced at the tattoo on his hand and the scar at the end of his eyebrow. Pretending to be frozen with fright, I stood still, not daring to move. His expression softened, reaching out to pull me up, but I quickly kicked him between the legs and ran for it. A crippling blow. He clutched his groin, turning pale. Seizing the moment, I ran without once looking back. Silence for 2 seconds, then from behind, I heard Spencer grinding his teeth. "Let that wretch escape, chase her." I sprinted with surprising speed, not daring to stop. Heavy breathing and curses from men echoed behind me. My heart pounded wildly, with only one thought in my mind: I must not get caught. Pearl's boyfriend had a dangerous vibe about him, a lawless brutality. His ease in declaring that I couldn't stay revealed his no ordinary status. Luckily, I knew the streets well. Turning left and right, I dashed into the night market, using the crowd to shake off my pursuers before they could react. I quickly returned to the school, fearing they might catch me just outside. "Sonny, you will pay for this." Once the school gates closed behind me, Pearl arrived, standing outside. Her eyes were sinister, and her smile chilling. A bad feeling lingered in my heart, but then I thought since I was already at school, Pearl could do nothing to me, so I pushed those thoughts aside. The exam topics were easy for me. Coming out of the exam hall, I sighed in relief. But when I turned on my phone, I found dozens of missed calls, all from my grandmother's doctor. My heart skipped a beat, and I rushed to the hospital by taxi. When I reached my grandmother's room, it was empty. I stumbled into the doctor's office. As he saw me, his lips twitched. I grabbed his collar and demanded, "Where is my grandmother?" "In the morgue," he said. The words hit me like a hammer. A sharp screech echoed in my mind. My vision darkened as I asked hoarsely, "Was the surgery not successful?" He shook his head, pity in his eyes. "No, it was successful." In disbelief, I asked, "Then why?" He explained, "Your grandmother tried to find you in the middle of the night, fell down the stairs and died from excessive blood loss before we found her." I fought back tears, shaking my head. How could she go out in the middle of the night? I couldn't believe such an accident would happen to her and caused a scene until the hospital showed me the surveillance footage. The staff was extremely impatient. "We told you, your grandmother went out on her own. Who could watch her at night? Just take care of her funeral. Lingering here won't help. Don't expect any compensation from us." I ignored him, my eyes glued to the surveillance monitor. Then I saw Pearl. She approached my grandmother effortlessly, started a conversation with a smile, and after half an hour, Pearl left. At 3 in the morning the next day, my grandmother climbed out of bed, unsteady on her feet, mumbling, "Find Sonny, don't let Sonny be bullied," and instead of taking the elevator, she descended the staircase. The manager said, "It's strange, why go around to the stairs? Isn't the elevator just to the right as you exit the ward?" I took a deep breath, my eyes heavy. There are no cameras on the staircase. I finally realized what Pearl's expression meant that day. Given her status, finding out my grandmother's ward was not a problem. I stormed out, and at the hospital entrance, there stood Pearl, grinning wildly. "It was you," I stated, completely certain. She didn't deny it, playfully winked at me, and said, "I told you there would be a price to pay." Unable to control my emotions, I grabbed her collar. "You're talking about a real human life here." Pearl brushed off my hand, frowning coquettishly. "This is designer wear, don't ruin it. It's just an old rag picker you're getting worked up about. Besides, if you hadn't stumbled upon my secret, I wouldn't have had to dirty my hands. I'm warning you, Sonny, you better behave, or you'll end up just like that dead old woman, an old rag picker." Even if my grandmother was poor and lived off collecting scraps, she was kind and self-sufficient, never troubling anyone. I fought back tears, anger spreading within me. "Just because she's poor, she deserves to be trampled on." Pearl raised her chin, supremely arrogant. "Of course, being poor is a sin itself. I was doing her a favor. Life was too hard for her anyway." My eyes reddened, my fists white-knuckled. Pearl seemed to recall something, smiling maliciously. "She was lucky, you know." She was still breathing after falling down those high stairs, mumbling about wanting to find you. "Worried you were being bullied at school. Too bad she couldn't move." I stared at her intensely as she continued, "Do you know why she went out to find you in the middle of the night? Because I told her you were being bullied at school. She was so upset and anxious but couldn't leave the hospital, so I suggested she sneak out to see you at night. She really listened well." I lost control. All my life, my goal was to give my grandmother a better life. Now she was gone, and I didn't want to live either. Pearl deserved to die. At the hospital intersection, the light turned green. I glimpsed the speeding cars and pushed Pearl out into the road. Screams mixed with the harsh sound of brakes. I watched coldly as Pearl lay on the ground, her lower half exposed, her legs crushed under the wheels. Blood pooled beneath her, like some ancient bloody altar, and her pale face was the perfect sacrifice. I turned away without a second glance. My grandmother was still in the morgue. I needed to take care of her. The morgue was really cold, the chilling cold that seeped into your bones. Standing in front of my grandmother's body, tears burned by hatred spilled again. I held her hand, crying out to her, "Didn't you say you wanted to live to be 100? How could you just leave me?" I finished my exams. The questions were easy. I must be first again. I wasn't bullied. You always thought I was still that little fool from childhood, too scared to speak up when bullied. That disease was awful. I stood in front of you so many times, yet you never recognized me, not even when it was time for me to leave. I was almost possessed, repeatedly asking, "You didn't see me when I left. Do you blame me, Grandma? Do you think I never came to visit you? Do you blame me, even though the surgery was successful? She was killed because of me. Do you blame me?" The police found me at the crematorium. When I saw them, I wasn't panicked. I gave the last 50,000 yuan I had to the staff, asking them to take care of Grandma's burial. At the police station, the James family was already waiting. Snap! Zoe slapped me across the face, furiously saying, "You lunatic, how dare you hurt Pearl?" I touched my cheek, the pain radiating deep into my heart, numbing my entire body. I looked him straight in the eyes, my voice icy. "Do you think Pearl is so innocent? If it weren't for her causing my grandma's death, I wouldn't have laid a hand on her. Now it's merely a life for a life." Zoe's pupils shrank. "What do you mean?" I broke free from the restraints, pulled out my phone from the bag, and played a recording. Pearl's smug voice filled the air. That old hag's life was tough. I was afraid she'd alert others, so I just hit her on the back of her head with a stick, and she passed out instantly. Zoe's hands trembled. I flipped through the photos of Spencer and Pearl I had taken that day and showed them to him, my face mocking. Zoe, is this the obedient and sensible daughter you talk about? Zoe looked drained, as if he had aged 10 years in a moment. He stared at me, his facial muscles uncontrollably twitching. This can't be possible. This can't be possible. Luna shook her head obsessively, as if brainwashing herself. Pearl is so sensible. How could she do such a thing? It's absolutely impossible. You must be framing her. I laughed loudly, mocking their inability to see people's true colors, thinking their cruel daughter was obedient and sensible, and mocking their self-deception. The evidence was right in front of them, yet they refused to believe. I scanned the faces of the James family members. Their faces were pale, their bodies trembling, as if they were enduring immense pain. But who could hurt as I do? My grandma, whom I depended on, died because of Pearl's selfish actions. I wished I could tear her to pieces. I was detained. A week later, Zoe came to see me. He had aged considerably, his normally straight back now bent, and his gaze lacked its former disdain. My tone was cold. What do you want? He smiled ingratiatingly. We've cleared things up. Pearl, indeed, isn't what she seemed. She admitted to being responsible for your grandma's death. Her boyfriend, Spencer, is a gang member with a history of murder, recently released from prison. We've already dealt with him. He won't bother you again. These past years, Pearl, under the guise of the James family, bullied and tormented others at school, even driving 2 students to suicide. We had no idea. She settled things with money behind our backs. It doesn't concern me, I interrupted impatiently. I just want to know what's happening with Pearl now. Is she dead or not? Zoe quickly responded, his tone full of disgust when he mentioned Pearl. She was saved, but her legs were crushed, such an extent. Her voice trailed off, filled with sorrow. After the amputation was at a high level, I remained indifferent, pitying her continued existence in this world. After Zoe spoke, she carefully watched me. Sonny, I've had Pearl sign a forgiveness agreement. And I've arranged a mental health certificate for you. You'll be fine. I scoffed coldly. So, should I thank you for that? Zoe quickly shook her head. No need for thanks. We're family. I turned my head away disinterestedly. Get lost. His face showed sadness. Sonny, we were too proud before. We've looked into your affairs thoroughly, and know you've had a tough time. We all feel guilty. Your mother cries at home every day. I raised my voice. I said get lost. Zoe hurriedly apologized, coddling like one would a child. It's Dad's fault. I shouldn't have said those things. Just take care inside, and I'll come to get you out after a while. As Zoe turned to leave, I said at the moment he reached the door, I have no parents. The only family I have is my grandmother. I reminded him, Ms. Zoe, don't forget our agreement. I and the James family are strangers from now on. Better we remain as such. Zoe's steps halted. His back bent as if he couldn't bear it, and he quickly left. I don't know how Zoe managed it, but my act of pushing Pearl into the middle of the road was deemed a result of mental instability, and no criminal charges were pursued against me. On the day I was released, Zoe came, accompanied by other members of the James family. I watched coldly as they helped me into the car, nervously making conversation, fearful of upsetting me. Their attempts to hide their gazes and the thick guilt in their eyes annoyed me, not to mention the sobbing near my ear, which I found even more irritating. In an indifferent tone, I said, "Can you stop crying? It's annoying." Luna quickly wiped the tears from her face and said in a cautious whisper, "I'm sorry." Her face grew even more vulnerable. "I'm sorry, Sonny," I sighed. "There's no need. You don't have to please me. The James family doesn't need to have a daughter without Pearl. You can still live well." Luna shook her head desperately. "Without you, we can't live well." I was unreasonably rational, but for the first 16 years, you lived well without me in your home. Tears ran down Luna's face. "Don't say that, it hurts my heart. Sonny, we owe you. Give Mom a chance to make amends." I met her hopeful gaze and refused without hesitation. "Ms. Luna, if you really want a daughter, you and Ms. Zoe are still young. It's not too late to adopt one now." She shook her head desperately, but none of them would be you, the daughter I carried for 10 months. I looked at her directly, my voice soft yet faint. Nor am I. Luna froze, her face turning pale as she stammered, "You hate me so much. Do you no longer recognize me as your biological mother?" she asked. I shattered her illusion. "Yes, you are Pearl's mother, and you can be Sunny's mother too, but my last name is Lee." She broke down in tears, disregarding her appearance. Her swollen eyes pitifully looking at me, filled with regret. I comforted her. "Life is often full of disappointments. Once this period is over, you'll realize that I'm not as important as you think. Without me, you can still lead a happy life." For some reason, Luna burst into even more tears after hearing this. During my stay with the James family, they treated me as if I were a rare treasure, indulging my every whim and asking for my opinion on everything. For instance, when it was time to change the curtains at home, they would let me choose a color I liked. If the flowers in the garden weren't blooming well, they would ask me to pick a new variety to plant. Once, when I wasn't feeling like eating and left 2 buns on my plate, Jack cautiously came up to me and asked, "Don't like them? Should we change the chef and let you oversee?" I pushed his face away. "There's no need, I won't be staying long." Jack hung his head, looking like a dejected, silly big dog. As he turned away, I stared at him in a daze for quite a while. Honestly, my current life is far better than the warm family life I imagined as a child. By a million times. Everyone indulges me. Zoe, a real business mogul, always has fresh perspectives and enjoys sharing his entrepreneurial experiences with me, which are quite enlightening. Luna is not the typical housewife. She has her own career and a weekly tea session. After each session, she teaches me how to manage interpersonal relationships. Ron is a scholarly genius. When I have nothing better to do and solve problems, discussing them with him always brings new insights. Knowing my interest in physics, he often asks friends to bring me books from abroad. Jack, on the other hand, messes around with me on regular days and brings me interesting little gadgets when we go out, always fiercely protective when it matters. I often think, if I hadn't been kidnapped, I would have been truly happy in such a family environment. I revel in this familial love, yet I am also acutely aware that no matter how hard the James family tries, there's a huge chasm between us filled with their disdain for me, their adoration for Pearl, and my grandmother's demise. I remember, my name is Sunny. That name was given to me by the old lady who braved the cold winters, collecting old newspapers and books, asking everyone she met to help choose it. A peaceful and smooth life, where life is forever like the sunrise, devoid of harsh winters. The day the college entrance examination results were released, I ranked first in the city and was admitted to Tsinghua University. I took the admission letter to my grandmother's grave and sat there until it was dark. The entire James family came out looking for me and breathed a huge sigh of relief upon finding me. Luna rushed to me, panic-stricken. "You scared me to death. I thought you had left." The moment she spoke, silence fell around us. After 2 seconds, Jack casually said, "What are we standing here for? Let's go home." On the way back, we talked about my results. Zoe's face was filled with delight. "Our family has produced another scholarly genius. The embarrassment Jack caused has been redeemed." Jack's face turned beet red. "Dad, why would you say that in front of my sister?" This was the first time he had openly called me sister, but I knew he had done so in secret many times before. When he went out to play ball with friends, he'd secretly brag about how great I was at studying, always saying that his sister was the smartest. When calling me to dinner, he'd stand at the door for over 10 minutes, foolishly calling out, "Sister," in a voice so soft it was almost like a mosquito's, afraid that I would hear him. And half a month ago on my birthday, he got drunk with Ron, both of them lying crooked on the sofa, giggling stupidly, one saying, "My sister is the best," the other countering, "No, my sister is the best." The car fell into an awkward silence. Jack sneaked a glance at me, and seeing no reaction, he boldly spoke up again. "I just want to be the brother my sister admires. Don't I deserve some respect?" I laughed, teasing him. "You've always been thick-skinned. If one face falls off, you still have several left." Seeing me laugh, the whole family was stunned and then burst into joy, joining in the fun and making the atmosphere in the car lively and warm. The next day, I went to the hospital where Pearl was staying. Indeed, due to a high-level amputation, she was incapable of caring for herself. The public security allowed her to be hospitalized outside of prison, so she was placed in a hospital owned by the James family. Initially, the James family did not intend to do this to avoid any suspicion, but at my insistence, they took Pearl in. Their intention was clear. Pearl was at my mercy. Because of hatred, I instructed the nurses to use the most irritating and painful medications when changing her dressings. Watching her writhe in agony brought me a perverse joy, but gradually, I found it boring. Torturing someone only brought fleeting pleasure. My heart felt empty. In torturing her, I was also torturing myself. Neither of us could find relief. I decided to let go. When I entered her room, she glared at me viciously. "What new method have you thought of to torture me this time?" I calmly replied, "You misunderstand. I'm here to share good news. I've been accepted into Tsinghua University, and I'm about to start studying there." Pearl sneered, "You expect me to bless you? We're not that close." I chuckled, "Of course not. I'm here to tell you that I've decided to let you go and to let myself go as well. This is my last visit. From now on, I will embark on my own life journey." Her expression froze, and then she began to scream, "I won't allow it. You've made my life so miserable, leaving me here like a cripple. What right do you have to walk away?" I watched her break down calmly. "Too bad. If you hadn't made those choices, you would still be the James family's darling daughter, surrounded by luxury cars, wearing high fashion, traveling abroad whenever you wished. Your life could have been so broad." Pearl laughed. "Do you think that will make me regret?" "Don't get too smug." Having said what I needed to, I turned and left. The laughter behind me continued, now tinged with sobs, though the nurse deliberately infused 400 cubic centimeters of blood instead of the 200 cubic centimeters I needed, causing me, already malnourished, to faint immediately. Upon returning to the James family, I packed all my belongings into a large bag and left without disturbing anyone. I left behind all the expensive cosmetics and clothes. They were mine to use but never truly belonged to me. After much thought, I left a letter expressing my gratitude to the James family for their care during this time, and also hoping they would not come looking for me. In the final lines of the letter, here's my translation, ensuring the language flows naturally in English. I still hold on to that saying, in life, 8 or 9 out of 10 things might not go your way. Hold on to what you have and let go of what you haven't with the wind. 4 years later, I graduated and set up a company with some alumni. At a gathering, I ran into Ron. By then, he had taken over his company, dressed sharply in a suit, handling everything with ease. He spotted me, hurried over, and stuttered a simple greeting, "Long time no see. How have you been?" I smiled sincerely. "Pretty good, that's good," he responded awkwardly, then suddenly changed the subject. "After you left, we called you many times and even went to Tsinghua to look for you. But we couldn't find any trace of you," he continued. "Everyone misses you and regrets what happened back then. Sonny, we really are sorry. Mom always says at home that we shouldn't have adopted Pearl, that we wronged you." "I know." Ron stopped abruptly, his face turned pale, and he laughed at himself. "You know everything, yet you still can't forgive us, can you?" He covered his eyes. "Honestly, Sun Ning, sometimes I really hate this rational side of you. It's so hurtful. But sometimes, I'm also glad you have it. No matter the hardship, whether it's from us or someone else, you always manage to get through it and never look back." I just looked at him with a light smile. "You can go, I'll talk to them at home," Ron said awkwardly, avoiding my gaze. "We hurt you, and it's your right not to forgive." We clinked glasses. "Thanks, President Ron." As I turned to leave, I suddenly heard Ron's voice, strained to the extreme. "Sonny, if I had been nicer to you back then, would you call me brother, maybe?" As I walked out the door, I glanced back unintentionally. Ron was covering his eyes, his shoulders shaking, as if he were crying. I shook my head, laughing at myself for overthinking it. I'm just a stranger after all. It shouldn't matter. That's all about this story. Do you have any insights after watching the above story? Feel free to tell us in the comments sections below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe my channel please. See you next time.